guys, Dr. Epic here. Welcome back to this racially charged series. This is a series where we rank each Citadel race in Mass Effect, and then we speculate on their potential roles for the next Mass Effect game. This time we're evaluating the big, based jellyfish known as hanar. Much like the Elcor that we looked at last, I have to give the hanar a lot of points for originality and uniqueness. Their biology is very different and unique compared to the other species, with the hanar being an aquatic species with natural toxins, no gender, tentacles, speaking through bioluminescence and this ethereal voice. Aside from the Leviathans, I believe the hanar are the only other intelligent aquatic creature that we know of in the Mass Effect universe. Their culture is also in general pretty cool and unique, regarding for example their use of soul and face names, as well as them being very polite and taking offense at small errors in language apparently. And who can forget their religious zeal when it comes to all things Prothean, like blocking Prothean dig sites or just preaching on the Citadel. The relationship with the Drell, like we touched on earlier in this series, is also very unique for a sci-fi setting, in my opinion. Like the Elcor, the hanar don't really impact the story of the games in any noteworthy way, save for some war assets in Mass Effect 3, but let's be real guys, literally everything is a war asset in Mass Effect 3. Even the friggin' resources from planet probing in Mass Effect 2 is a war asset, okay? But, you know, speaking of war, the hanar have a small military capacity, donning a relatively small navy, as well as limited land warfare capability, obviously. They seem to primarily rely on Drell assistance when they're going on land and want to fight, and then primarily they just use them as spies and assassins and that kind of stuff. The relationship between the hanar and the Drell is very fascinating. The hanar are likely the ones we have to thank for the Drell race surviving at all. As we all know, they had this kind of ecological collapse, this day after tomorrow, Battlefield 2042 chaos stuff going on their homeworld, so they were basically going extinct, but the hanar came and gave them a rat out of there or something. This act of grace is what laid the foundations for the so-called compact, which is a sort of debt of gratitude or a treaty of cooperation between the Drell and the hanar, where they, you know, offer services to each other. Even though the hanar military might be weak, I want to see more truly alien aliens like the hanar. And Mass Effect would not be Mass Effect without the hanar, so I'm very comfortable in giving them a lot of points that help their ranking, just from this cool lore. But what about the potential for Mass Effect 4? What role could the hanar possibly fill? What will these guys get up to? This kinda depends on which ending is canon. Mass Effect 3 has roughly 4 different endings to choose from, where one likely will be made canon, or all 4 if my wettest hanar-filled dreams will come true. These are the Refusal ending, Control, Synthesis, and Destroy ending. In the Refusal ending, the Reapers are either still alive in dark space or eradicated, I imagine, and possibly there's a brand new cycle and generation of Milky Way races dominating the galaxy as well. In order to have survived into this time period, the hanar will have to have learned either how to freeze themselves into stasis for a long time period, which would have to be a very long time period, way longer than the journey of the Arcs to Andromeda, I would imagine, considering each Reaper cycle is usually 50,000 years. The Protheans tried, they struggled and failed at this several times, most notably at Eden Prime and Ilos. That leaves me to find it very unlikely that these big brain hanar alone, or even with the help from other intelligent and sophisticated species of our time like the Solarians or Asari, can manage such a feat. Then on the other side, we do know that the hanar are very worshipping of the Protheans and have probably a lot of relics of theirs at their homeworld. They probably collect a lot of Prothean artifacts in general. Maybe that could give them a technological edge here, something we've never seen or heard about before, who knows? And so you know, their Prothean fixation could theoretically result in them finding a breakthrough in stasis technology, which would allow them to survive the Refusal ending and be present. But a more likely way for the hanar to return to the Milky Way in the Refusal scenario is that the hanar that traveled to Andromeda have returned, perhaps having grown in numbers and power. Hanar nature, much like the Elcor nature, is very peaceful and seemingly not that interested in warfare or conflict. This philosophy could have changed after the Reaper War, with the hanar perhaps coming to some sort of collective realization that greater military power than what they had is needed to keep themselves and their Drell companions safe. I do find it difficult to believe that the hanar will grow into a super dominating economic, political or military powerhouse, given their already small power level in the OG games. Probably that's even worse after the Reaper War. So, as well, only a very small hanar population was sent to Andromeda, and depending on the actions of Shepard in Mass Effect 3, the hanar homeworld will either be completely overrun by the Reaper forces, or it could be saved, seemingly in its entirety. It would be cool to see the effects of this choice reflected in the fate of the hanar in the next game, and I really hope this is one of the choices that have a consequence in the next game. In a scenario where we are rebelling against the Reaper overlords, for example, I find it hard to believe that the hanar themselves will be of much value. Perhaps for underwater fights or something like that, they could prove useful, as I believe Thane described them as very majestic, fast and impressive creatures when they're in their natural habitat. When they're not fish out of water, so to speak. If we were to fight, say, the Leviathans, I reckon that the hanar technology and manpower could be very useful. Other than that, their use is limited to their skill in political subterfuge, espionage and use of trained Drell personnel by the power of the Compact. That kind of soft power, behind the scenes stuff. So if there is to be any conflict after choosing the control or synthesis ending, then I imagine it would play out fairly similar to how it would play out in the Refusal universe. I'm then referring to the story being a kind of rebellion against the Reapers themselves, either because of the evil Shepard control AI or some other reason, or some faction that's perhaps aligned with all or some of the Reapers that survived. I imagine the hanar then could play a role that's similar to what I described in the Refusal ending, where they help you with the underwater stuff, kind of behind the scenes, not a huge military power. I believe that BioWare will probably most likely choose the Destroy ending as the canon ending on which to build the next Mass Effect. I know. Everybody wants their favorite ending to be chosen, but I preferably want every single ending to be canon. But I know that's probably physically impossible for them to achieve, so... but it's not about what I want. I think the most likely choice for them is the Destroy ending as the canon ending. And I have made a video on this, so you could check that out if you want to. In such a universe, with the Destroy ending as canon, then the writers will have a lot of freedom as to where to take the story, whereas the other three endings put a lot of restraint on the setting, basically. After the Reaper War, the power balance will have been shifted dramatically, so theoretically any race can take the mantle of power as the next big cheese. I do, sadly, no matter how much we want to welcome our new tentacle overlords, have little faith in the vastly outnumbered hanar being able to outcompete the Krogan, Turians, Asari, or even Quarians, for instance. However, the hanar might be able to broker some kind of deal with the Leviathans from a kind of aquatic brotherhood, though I personally would assume that the Leviathans are more likely to just retreat back into uncharted space in the next game, so they, can avoid being bothered anymore than they already have. That is, if they don't suddenly revive their imperialistic ambitions again and want to enslave everybody, which would make them one of the most likely villains of Mass Effect 4, but I guess that's another kind of video. In a scenario where the Leviathans are more central to the plot than they were in the previous games, I would reckon that the hanar and the Leviathans would actually be very competitive against each other and maybe even hostile, as I'm sure that a good habitable water world is a resource that they would all like to have exclusively for themselves. But who knows? And if the Drell were to try and establish their own nations independent of the Compact and the hanar, then the hanar military power would decrease even more, making them an even weaker player on the galactic stage. Again, if hanar from Andromeda were to return with reinforcements, this could mitigate existing weaknesses of the Milky Way galaxy. So to summarize, I think the hanar likely won't be a big player this time either. I think they will most likely return to the role they had before as a small economic power with a few merchants here and there, but nothing that really impacts the story that much. But there are a lot of variables to consider, like what will the Drell do? Did Shepard save the Hanar homeworld or not? What impact will the Andromeda Hanar have for the Milky Way, etc. I seriously want a Hanar squad mate, and I'm sure some of you out there want a Hanar romance option, and to each their own, of course. Just don't do that shit in public. I also really want some sort of underwater mission where the Hanar can show their true skills. Visiting Kajay would be amazing, seeing the compact working in the flesh, the domed cities and the great ocean of the encompassing. That's really good nerd stuff right there. Hanar lore is really cool and fascinating on all levels. I find them to be truly alien and really unique. The Hanar are an easy Garrus tier. Easy for me. Even though they don't have that much impact on the story, they just have that really good X factor to me. And that's kind of decisive in these evaluations. The only thing these guys need is more screen time.
Go home, I'm rewriting all of your parts. Except for you, Jeffrey. You have locked into something here. And the only thing your character needs is more screen time.
Do you disagree? Should they be lower on the list? What do you think the Hanar's role in Mass Effect 4 will be, if not something like what I've described here? Is there something I missed? Something like that. This is Dr. Epic, signing out. Remember, like if cool, dislike if cringe, and enkindle that subscribe button, alright? See you later.